Good evening. My name is Lance Butler, and this is one of our last assignments for this class in spiritual transformation. I am supposed to create a lesson and to give my experiences of the spiritual discipline that I like the most, or one of the ones that I like the most. The one that I chose, or that I'm choosing, excuse me, and ironically enough, it's on the Sabbath. The spiritual discipline that I chose is the Sabbath. Um, it's kind of not surprising to me that this spiritual discipline of the Sabbath is the one that I would potentially choose, because during the course of our class, some of the spiritual disciplines that I liked the most were the ones that forced you to be quiet. I shouldn't say forced, but the best way to practice them was in silence. For example, the spiritual discipline of silence, the spiritual discipline of self-examination, the spiritual discipline of solitude. Um, it just, for me, because I don't get much time to myself, because I have custody of 4 kids, the ability to have solitude and silence is very far and few between. Um, and also, the ability to rest is far and few between as well. Unfortunately, I enjoy it, but I feel like I don't get enough of those things. Now, the Sabbath, the technical definition, would essentially be, I would say, what everyone knows, or is concept of the simplistic concept of the Sabbath, and that is the theological meaning rooted in God's rest following the 6 days of creation. Um, and that's what, growing up, I knew the Sabbath to be. As a child, I related the Sabbath to the seventh day we rest, because God created us in 6, right? I also related the Sabbath to it being the 7th day of the work week. It's the day before the beginning of the new work week, so I wouldn't look forward to going to class or to school, or just the responsibilities coming up for the next week. And as I become older, it changed somewhat, but I started relating it to going to church. After church, everyone goes out to lunch. Instead of getting excited about the Sabbath, I would get excited about going to lunch. Um, Also, I started relating it to, as I became even older and became to have children, that day for a quote unquote catch up day, right? Doing chores, doing yard work, working on the cars, maybe working a second job to get money, things of that nature. And of course, that's not what the true intention and meaning of the Sabbath is. In our book, Spiritual Discipline, it gives 2 main points. One of them in which is we're supposed to uh, practice the Sabbath. One, because it's a gift that God gave to us, because He rested on the 7th day. So therefore, we're supposed to rest and recuperate. And then also, the Jews, their Sabbath, they're supposed to do it in remembrance of not only God resting on the 7th day, but God delivering the Jews from delivering the Jews from bondage and slavery, and in which point they're supposed to rest and give thanks, and keep it holy. During researching the the discipline of Sabbath, of the Sabbath, not only did I read the books that we have for the class, In the Name of Jesus, Sacred Rhythms, and the Spiritual Discipline Handbook, I looked up to find scriptures on the internet that I could cross reference. And unbeknownst to me, there was quite a bit. There's over 98 scriptures where the Sabbath is directly mentioned in the Bible. Uh, One of the ones, of course, um, the one that I heard the most was Exodus 20, verse 8 through 11, in which it says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no work, you, your son, or your daughter, or your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock um, should not do any work. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Mark 2, verse 27. "And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." Which I like that. That's a pretty cool concept. It was made, you know, it was made for us specifically. And in some of the other literature that I read, they related the Sabbath as nothing more than a gift, a wonderful, precious gift in which we are supposed to rest and recuperate and re-energize ourselves physically, mentally, but not only that, spiritually. Um, During the Sabbath, you're supposed to reflect and ask yourself different questions of, for example, in spiritual handbooks, it says, the exercise reflection questions: what difficulties or compulsions make it hard for you to stop? Well, one of mine is the anxiety that I get from not being able to accomplish what I want to accomplish within a day. That's hard for me. Also, how does taking a Sabbath enhance your enjoyment and worship of God? Well, it enhances my worship of God because now that I have a better understanding of what the Sabbath is, it's not just to rest. If you want to do that, rest. But in the explanation in the books that I've read, you're supposed to rest in what you enjoy doing. So for me, that's working out, that's gardening, that's being outside, that is being with my girlfriend Elena, that is being with my kids. And see, I just now found that out. I thought you were just supposed to rest. I thought you were supposed to just rest and not do any work or anything that you like. However, that's directly the opposite. To rest for me is to do those things I mentioned, but it might be different for someone else. For my daughter Madison, the Sabbath would be today was in her room all day doing nothing. For my girlfriend Elena, it was sitting in the chair basking in the sun watching me work outdoors. For my daughter Lily, it was using her imagination and playing and not having to worry about any chores. For my other daughter Lucy, it was playing with friends, doing softball, rollerblading, playing with her pets. And for my son LJ, it was loving on me. It was loving on my girlfriend. It was being underneath me all day, digging in the dirt, digging with worms, helping helping my neighbor fix his car. So everyone rests differently. But see, while you're resting, you're not just supposed to focus on resting for you, but you're supposed to focus on spiritually accepting and wanting God to speak to you while you're doing these things. See, the whole concept is to disconnect from everything. You're supposed to rest, but you're also supposed to reflect and ask Jesus, what do you have for me? What do you need me to do this week? How can I better serve you? In what way can I serve you? Maybe I know when I was gardening, I was praying. silently in my head to myself pretty much all day. And there would be intermittent times where I wouldn't, and then I would come back to it, you know. Um, and with that being said, it wasn't just that I woke up today and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do to rest on the Sabbath. For me, and I would recommend for anyone else, I would strategically begin to plan what you want to do the night before. Excuse me. And that's what I began to do. It also states in the Spiritual Disciplines Handbook that that's something good for you to do. I mean, you would have a plan for the week, right? Just to get up and go to work and to do your responsibilities. It shouldn't be any different for the Sabbath. You should pre-plan what you want to do on your day of rest, so you don't even have to wake up and worry about it, right? So the day before, I began to prepare and I began to ask myself what are some of the things that I would want to do. And I began to build a list in my head. But not only that, the day before, because I knew I would become anxious, I tried to knock out some of the things that I otherwise would on Sunday. And then what I did is I began to see what my kids, I wouldn't say, well, what do you want to do for the Sabbath? But I began to ask my kids, what do you want to do tomorrow? And my son would say, I want to play, Daddy. My oldest daughter would say nothing. She's 13, God love it, but she would say nothing. And then Lucy would tell me something, and then Lily would tell me something, and then Elena would tell me something else. And it all came to pass. Now, I'm not saying that we couldn't have done that or it couldn't have happened if I hadn't have planned it, but I think it would have been more chaotic. I think that I would have had more angst, and I don't think that I would have been able to listen to what God intended me to hear today. So about that. So while I'm practicing the Sabbath and I'm reflecting and I'm praying and I'm asking these things to God and to Jesus, I began to feel a calmness. I didn't feel guilty for not being productive. Zelda. I began to be patient. I began to ask God the things that I normally wouldn't ask of Him because I would be too busy, which I know doesn't make sense, but I had no other option but to be with myself and with God and to ask, how can I become a better person, a better man? And I didn't get any answers, honestly. I didn't. However, it felt okay not to get those answers because I was resting and energized, and I understood that this is what God intended. So to conclude, I would encourage everyone to not only just relate the Sabbath to Sunday and to worshiping God, but take it a step further and actually practice it. Disconnect from cell phones, disconnect from some of the worldly devices that you normally wouldn't during the week. And I would imagine, and as I'm going to find, and as I'm finding that with repetition and consistently doing it, I'm becoming to look forward to Sundays. Even when I don't have my kids with Elena, for her and I just to rest and relax with one another and, to build that godly relationship. And then when I do have my kids, I'm able to rest and relax with them and to really become a part of their lives and see how God is working with them. So I want to thank you, and y'all have a wonderful evening.